There are places that should never be awakened. Krankenhaus Waldstein is one of them. I'm a filmmaker specializing in documentaries about abandoned places, where time has died, but sound still lingers. In early spring of 2024, my team and I ventured into an old Nazi hospital deep in the forest near the German-Austrian border. The hospital had been abandoned since 1945, when the war ended. Strangely, no one had dared to touch it since. The locals call it the open morgue. They say there's a room on the 3rd floor that was used for experiments, rather than treatment, room 206. I decided to stay the night to capture audio and video. The team objected, but I was firm. As night fell, I set up cameras along the corridors and went up to the 3rd floor, where the air was thick with mold and cold as a crypt. Room 206 emerged, its thick wooden door shut tight. The handle marked by a faded stain of dried blood. Something felt very wrong. Still, I placed a camera facing the door and returned to the monitoring room downstairs. 12:13 a.m. The hallway camera picked up the first sound. Creak, creak, like a rusty hinge forced open. I assumed it was rats. 12:41 a.m. The moaning began, not loud, but dry and persistent, like someone buried alive, rasping through soil. I checked the camera. Room 206 remained closed, but the lens quivered slightly, as if someone had just passed by. 1:10 a.m. Heavy footsteps pounded on the rotting wooden floor. I burst out of the room. No one, but the camera had caught the fleeting image of a figure in a German uniform, face obscured, gliding past the left corner of the screen. 2:06 a.m. I jolted awake. Something was pressing down on my chest. I looked down, a cold, small hand, and it was decomposing. I didn't stay a minute longer. By 4 a.m., I had left the hospital. But when I got back to the hotel, I found something I still can't explain. Inside my backpack was an old folder. The paper yellowed, reeking of antiseptic. The cover read, Case 206 Franz Adler, March 1944. Franz Adler, SS Second Lieutenant. Admitted in March 1944 for psychiatric reasons. The doctor's notes say he suffered from acute paranoia, constantly speaking to the voices beneath the floor. But scribbled in the margins, in dark brown ink, someone had written, "He's not insane. He saw what we tried to hide." The photo attached was a waking nightmare. Franz was strapped to an iron bed with leather restraints, a cloth stuffed into his mouth, and 2 sunken black eye sockets, empty, as if someone had gouged them out. I raised my phone to take a picture. The screen flickered, then displayed a message. Access denied. ROM 206 gesperrt. Room 206 sealed. I went back to the hospital. Alone. Down in the basement, I found the archive room choked with dust and a pungent moldy smell. In the corner of a metal cabinet, I pulled out an old photo album. On the last page was a picture of Chief Physician Wilhelm Kruger shaking hands with someone who had been violently torn out of the photo. The caption read, Experiment abgeschlossen, ROM 206 East Barrett. Experiment completed. Room 206 is ready. Returning to the 3rd floor, I saw what froze my blood. Room 206 was open. No sound, no movement, but inside, scratch marks. Long, dried, bloody trails like fingernails dragging across the floor. At the far end, a scrap of paper was nailed to the wall with a rusty spike. Scrawled on it, "Do not let them hear your moans. If they hear, they will come, not to save you, but to ensure you never survive." I looked down. A rusty nail lay on the floor, stuck with gray hair and dried blood. The moment I touched it, I heard a whisper right at my ear. "Drive it into your heart, before the second door opens." I looked up and saw Franz, still in his SS uniform. Empty sockets in place of eyes, sliding toward me without moving his feet. He was groaning, but the sound came from his stomach. A blood-soaked, hate-filled groan. I ran. That night, I dreamt of a rotting black hand piercing through my chest. On the back of that hand, the number 206 was carved with a rusty blade. I woke up with a dry bloodstain over my heart. I left the hospital a second time, this time knowing I had brought something back that didn't belong in this world. 3 days later, back at the hotel, the scratching began. First, it was on the bathroom mirror. 4 long, curved lines appeared in the steam. Even though I was completely alone, I wiped them away. They reappeared, deeper, as if etched into the glass. I set up a camera overnight, aimed at the mirror, reviewing the footage. The video froze at 3:06 a.m., just as the mirror quivered slightly and the surface dented inward. A hand emerged from the other side of the mirror. Its nails were long and claw-like, lightly scratching at the glass. But in real life, the mirror still looked intact, except now the scratches were deeper and permanent. I felt watched. In the dark, I heard rapid breathing close to my ear, but saw no one. Then I saw Franz, standing in the hotel hallway, looking up at me from the floor below. His eye sockets were still black voids, but he was smiling. I decided to return to Krankenhaus Waldstein, this time armed with thermal scanners and sub-frequency recorders. There was no more doubt, this thing was real. Back on the 3rd floor, room 206 was still open, but now inside was a mirror, large, caked with dust and dried blood. I wiped it. In the reflection, I saw myself, but behind me stood Franz. Still, silent. I turned, no one there. Looked back into the mirror, he was still there. He began walking toward me, inside the mirror. Suddenly, a screech erupted from behind the glass, like laughter mixed with breaking glass and weeping. The mirror cracked. With each step Franz took, another fracture spread outward. I ran from the room. Back at the hotel, I discovered the most terrifying thing of all. The scratches were no longer on the mirror. They were on me, on my chest. 5 long claw-like slashes, raw, festering, and bleeding. Each morning, they grow deeper. I've realized something. Franz is no longer trapped in room 206. He's coming through the mirror, little by little, and every time I look into a mirror, he's closer. After the 3rd night, I began hearing groaning, coming from the walls of the hotel room. Not insects, not pipes, but a human voice, hoarse, strangled, like someone being choked. When I pressed my ear to the wall, I heard a single phrase repeated over and over. Raus, raus aus mir. Get out of me. I changed hotels that very night, but the sound followed me. It echoed from the walls, no matter where I went. I screamed, shattering the mirror, but the blood from my hand didn't fall to the floor. It floated, suspended in midair, then drifted toward a wall. The wall absorbed the blood and revealed a new door. No handle, no hinges, but it breathed. I opened it and was pulled inside. Not into a hallway, not into a room, but into a stomach. All around me, flesh, heartbeat, and the wet sound of something being devoured alive. In the middle of this chamber of meat was a chair. On it sat me. Another version, older, shriveled, blind-eyed, mouth muttering the same words. 206, 206. It devours anyone who tries to understand it. It's full now, but it will hunger again. And you're dessert. I screamed, trying to escape this living nightmare. I grabbed the surgical knife from my double and stabbed the surrounding flesh. Everything shook. Agonized moans erupted from all directions. I woke up in my apartment, soaked in blood, but without a single wound. On the ceiling, a single line of text formed in blood. You have been swallowed. From now on, every breath you take is its breath. Since then, whenever I sleep, I no longer dream. I live the memories of those who died in room 206. One by one, each death, each endless moan. Since that night, I have not been myself. I am now a vessel for voices with no name. A mirror reflecting the unrested souls trapped within Waldstein Hospital. Every time I drift into sleep, my dreams are not dreams at all, but memories belonging to others. A doctor burned alive. A nurse entombed within a wall. A patient injected with the wrong dose as an experiment. On the third night, I dreamed of a never-ending hallway. Instead of room numbers, the walls bore names, each carved in blood. Among them, I saw my own. I stepped into an open room, an operating chamber turned torture site. A man was tied down, a rag stuffed in his mouth, eyes wide in terror, as if he'd seen something no one should ever see. On the wall, someone had scrawled in blood, "They're not dead, they're only kept forever." I jolted awake, not in my apartment, but on a rusted hospital bed. Around me, damp hallways, flickering fluorescent lights, and the sound of footsteps dragging across tiled floors. A familiar voice crackled from a corroded ceiling speaker. "Patient 206, please proceed to psychological treatment. We are ready for you." I ran, but the corridor stretched longer with every step. Doors creaked open, revealing twisted faces, bulging eyes, sagging skin, all whispering the same phrase. "Stay with us, stay with us, stay with us." A hand gripped my shoulder. I turned. It was the young nurse from the old file I'd read. But her face was no longer intact, charred, melted, deformed. She spoke. "If you want to escape, return the blood you borrowed. Go back to where it began." "Waldstein?" I asked. She nodded, then dissolved into black smoke. I touched the wall. It revealed faded photographs, doctors, nurses, patients, and me, wearing a Nazi medical officer's uniform. I had been there. I was part of that hospital. Memories surged like a wave of blood. I was the head doctor. I had authorized inhumane experiments, covered up mysterious deaths, and ordered rebellious patients to be walled up alive. Room 206 wasn't where I was haunted. It was where I started the haunting. The souls cannot leave, because I never gave them peace. I collapsed. The wall behind me cracked open. And from within, a rotting hand reached out and dragged me into the darkness. The last thing I heard was the speaker announcing, "Welcome back, Chief Physician. The hospital is waiting for your eternal shift." I was pulled into a place with no light, only the stench of decay and the sound of breathing that wasn't mine. When I opened my eyes, I stood in an old surgical room, the only light coming from a flickering overhead lamp, rusted steel tables, blood-stained trays of instruments, and in the corner, a blackboard bearing a trembling inscription. "Not all patients wish to be healed." Laughter echoed from the walls, neither male nor female, but many voices layered across space. A figure in a white coat emerged. It had no face, no hands, just a stitched-together body like a patchwork of the dead. It came closer. On its chest was a name tag. Dr. Cruz, former director. I backed away, stumbling over something soft. Looking down, I realized I was standing on a pile of corpses. Dozens of them, stacked atop one another. One of them opened its eyes, grabbed my hand, and whispered, "Tell the truth, tell it all, before we fade again." A sharp pain drilled into my temporal lobe. Memories exploded in my mind. Meetings with Nazi doctors. We weren't healing the wounded. We were using them for research. Gasoline anesthesia, unanesthetized limb transplants, live brain surgery. After each failure, I ordered them buried alive in the walls of Wing D. Room 206 was not just a room, it was a curse. A marker for everything that began in horror. I broke down in tears. The voice of a woman I once locked in the basement for refusing to inject a patient echoed from the wall. "We don't want forgiveness. We want you to remember. All of it." The room began to collapse. The walls groaned. Bricks fell away, revealing layer after layer of people entombed within the mortar. Dozens. Hundreds of faces. One pair of eyes stared back. It was me, in full military uniform, smiling as I sealed someone alive behind the wall. I screamed, mad, clutching my head, but I could no longer run. I was the witness, the guilty, and the last one left alive to tell the story. In the dark, the whispers returned. "Tell it, let the world know. Tell it so we can rest." If you don't, you'll take our place. I opened my eyes, back in my room, or so I thought. But the walls were breathing. The mirror reflected someone who wasn't me. And beneath my bed, a medical file. After the nightmare, I tried to calm myself by writing everything down in my journal. But my hand trembled. Every word looked like someone else had rewritten it. The ink smudged like it was bleeding. The old hospital map I found in the library showed a massive underground level beneath Wing D, but strangely, there were no stairs or elevators leading down. No one in the current hospital staff knew anything about it, except for one man, Otto, the elderly night guard, who had worked there for over 40 years. Otto led me to a metal door behind a dusty curtain at the far end of the old morgue hallway. It had no handle, only a narrow slot, into which he slid a bone-shaped key. Not made of metal, real human bone. When the door opened, a freezing draft rushed out like the breath of hell. There were no stairs below, just a sloping concrete ramp, rough with drag marks and dried blood. We descended with only a flashlight. No echoes, no footsteps, as if the basement swallowed even sound. It was vast, a city beneath the hospital. Endless corridors, doorless cells, makeshift operating rooms. On the wall, a faded slogan, Anonymous Biological Research Division, only true death is a way out. Otto and I reached the largest room, a circular chamber with a surgical table in the center. The walls were made of two-way mirrors, like an observation lab. In the mirror, I saw myself lying on the table, though I hadn't moved. Panicked, I turned to Otto, but he was gone. A garbled voice came through the speaker. Next experiment begins. Subject: memory and pain threshold of the traitor. I was pulled into the past again. This time, I wasn't giving orders, I was the victim. Strapped down, cut open alive, forced to watch the soldiers I once commanded be tortured to death. Every scream etched itself into my bones like a curse. When I awoke, I was back in a hospital bed, soaked in sweat, heart racing, but under the bed, wheelchair tracks and a bloody surgical thread. I ran to find Otto. No one knew him. They said the morgue guard died in 1981. His body found in a stairless basement. This time, I'm the one afraid to sleep. Because I know, if I close my eyes, I'll slide back to that place. The place no one returns from. Where the whispers rise, every night. 3 days after I woke up in that hospital room, the air around the hospital thickened, not because of the weather, but because something was breathing. The hallway lights began to flicker rhythmically, like the pulsing muscles of a giant creature. I started having the same dream, over and over. In it, I stood in the underground operating room. 8 metal tables, 7 covered bodies. The 8th was empty, and I knew it was for me. The shrouded corpses whispered in unison. You went down there. Now you have to stay. I sought out Dr. Eichel, a man who had worked at the hospital during the war. He was the only one still alive from the list of physicians in 1943. When I mentioned level -2, he looked up, his milky eyes staring through me like he had been waiting for this moment. You think the soldiers died and that was the end? We tried to keep them. By any means. Brain transplants, blood extractions, spinal fluid from the living. You know what the worst part was? Some of them woke up, but they weren't themselves anymore. I couldn't leave the hospital. Every time I tried to pack and go, my legs froze, as if someone held me in place from beneath the floor. Every exit I opened, no matter where it led, would spit me back into the hallway of room 206. On the 4th night, I awoke in the middle of the night, and standing at my door was Otto. But it wasn't Otto. His face was twisted, dried blood caked around his eyes, skin torn in strips, but the voice was unmistakably his. You have to go back. Level -3 is open. Level -3, that doesn't exist. Not on any blueprint, but it's always been there. Beneath the lab floor. You've heard it already, in the earpiece. You thought the voices ended on level -2? That was just the invitation. Now it's your turn to respond. I couldn't resist. My body moved on its own, following Otto, or whatever wore his form, through the old morgue once more. Down into the underground passage. But this time, the sliding slope was gone. In its place was a spiral staircase, made of bone. The deeper we went, the thicker the smell of blood became. Sobs echoed around us. The walls began to change, taking on a strange biological texture. Slick with mucus and trembling beneath the flashlight's beam. At the end of the corridor stood a sealed room, covered in hundreds of talismans written in ancient German script, charred at the edges. Ink red as fresh blood. I opened the door. Inside was a large cylindrical tank. Floating inside, suspended in some pale fluid, was a man, still alive, his eyes wide open, but his mouth was gone, sewn shut with thick wire. Tubes pierced his body from every angle, pumping something in or out. Etched into his forehead was a twisted insignia, originally a Nazi medical officer's emblem, but warped into a spiral resembling a demon's eye. Suddenly, his gaze shifted. He looked straight at me, and a voice boomed inside my skull. 8 remain. The door will open. Blood will rise. The pain will be remembered. I staggered back, screaming, but the doorway behind me was gone. Only a wall of living flesh remained, closing slowly. Hungrily, I woke up with my throat clenched, my skin drenched in cold sweat. But I was no longer in the room with the man whose mouth had been sewn shut. I was lying in a blindingly white room, so white it glowed. No doors, no ceiling, no shadow of mine. A voice echoed from all directions, half whisper, half lullaby, twisted and haunting. You have seen the first face. There are 7 more. I realized I was naked. My skin was covered in small cuts, bleeding, but the blood didn't fall. It floated upward, as if drawn to an invisible point above me. The room trembled. Part of the wall melted away, revealing a new corridor, this one tiled with white stone, marked by blood-soaked footprints. I followed them. The deeper I went, the louder the heartbeat sound became. The walls on either side were now glass, and inside each panel, versions of me lay still. One had no face. Another was just skin wrapped over bones. One was screaming, but no sound came out. At the end of the corridor stood a door, carved above it in Latin, Adveniat sanguis, fiat iterum, blood will come. The pain will return. I pushed it open. Inside was a massive space like the hollow of a well. At the bottom, a pillar of human flesh, twisting like a grotesque spinal cord. Atop it, a dark, indistinct figure stared down at me. I heard its voice. The second face is ready. I woke up again, this time for real. Or so I thought. Room 206, just as before. Pale yellow lights. That sterile smell of antiseptic. The soft hum of ventilation. Everything so normal it made my skin crawl. Except one thing. On the bedside table, instead of water or medicine, was an old leather notebook, embossed with the spiral symbol. I opened it. Inside were notes from Dr. Eichel. But the handwriting grew shakier, more chaotic with every page. Experiment 6 has failed. The patient set himself on fire by biting through an electric cable. Eyes wide open at death. I can't go on. The voices have started invading my thoughts. They know my name. They call it when I sleep. Door number 7 will open. When all 8 awaken, the final gate will function. I was wrong. We shouldn't have touched it. At the bottom of the last page, written in red ink, the last one is you. I threw the notebook and bolted out of the room. But the hallway ahead wasn't the hospital corridor. It was a long, dark tunnel, carpeted in blood-soaked velvet. On the walls, hundreds of paintings of patients. Each one had my face, locked in varying states of agony. I ran. I didn't know where to. Ahead, a massive wooden door, carved with thousands of shut eyes. When I touched the handle, every eye on the door opened. A voice thundered in my mind. You've gone too far. There's no turning back. I pushed the door, Inside was room 206. But this time, I was on the bed. Asleep. Or dead. Otto stood beside the bed, looking at me, smiling. But it wasn't a human smile. Behind him stood 7 figures in white hospital gowns. Faces hidden, perfectly still. Each one whispering, "One more to go. The gate will be complete." I stepped back. The door behind me was gone. I turned to face myself on the bed. My eyes opened. No pupils, only a dark red spiral. Then everything went black. I don't know how long I was unconscious. But when I opened my eyes, I was floating in pitch black space. No gravity. No time. Only a heartbeat, not mine, but something massive. Ancient. Sleeping in the void. All around me. Hundreds of eyes opened. Every single one was mine. A voice rang out, no longer a whisper, but a cry from the depths of my soul. "You have seen. You have known. You cannot return." I tried to scream, but my body was no longer a body. I saw myself, not one, but hundreds of versions, each one twisted by pain, disease, torment. A massive hand emerged from the darkness. Its fingers were rusty syringes. And with them, it stitched blood-red runes into my skin. Eintritt, entrance. The pain split my mind apart. From my chest erupted a stream of black blood, shooting toward a swirling red light opening in the void. I knew. The 8th gate was awakening. Familiar faces returned. Otto, slumped over his own corpse. Dr. Eichel, laughing maniacally by the incinerator, gripping a torn experiment journal. The dead patients, one headless, one armless, all speaking in unison. "We are what remains. You are our eye." I tried to scream, but no sound came. On my forehead, the spiral burst into flames. Red light flooded everything. And then I woke up. Room 206. Sterile, white, suffocating silence. There was a knock. A nurse entered. Her face kind, but her eyes, hollow. "Welcome to St. Anselm Hospital. I'm the head nurse. What's your name?" I tried to answer, but my mouth wouldn't move. She smiled. "It's okay. We already have your name on record. You're patient number 8. I wanted to scream, but my throat had been sewn shut. On the table beside me was the same leather notebook. Spiral on the cover. And in the mirror, it didn't reflect the hospital room. It showed that other place, the red flesh chamber, where the 8th gate stood open. And the whispers returned. "From now on, you are the watcher at the door."